Is your condo completely worthless? If you own a condominium in Florida, is it just worth nothing now? That is what we're going to be talking about today, because that has caused a little bit of panic, a little bit of trepidation here in Florida, because at the end of the month, that's D-Day. That is when these condominiums, the homeowners associations, have to provide documentation that they have done the new required structural reports. So, if you own a condo in Florida, you need to know about this. If you're thinking about buying a condo in Florida, you need to know about this. So grab your coffee and let's chat. All right, now before we jump into this, let me just begin by saying, there are these rules and these things, and there's things we kind of poke fun at, myself included, and then it happens to us. So let me tell you what happened to me last week and why I'm wearing this heavy sweater kind of thing. So last week, I went to my granddaughter's gymnastics meet and I fell. Yes, I did. On a trip hazard. I'll just call it a trip hazard. So I was looking forward and walking, not looking down, because why would you? And I tripped on a mat and I fell really, really hard, and I tore it's called a labral tear. Am I saying that right? Labral tear. Anyway, they could see it on an x-ray, and I think it connects your shoulder to your rotator cuff. Anyway, I have a sling underneath this because my arm is killing me. So, I've always been one of those that when I would see trip hazard on an inspection report, I would always think that's ridiculous. Why does my seller need to deal with a trip hazard, whatever the heck that is? Well, you listen, now I know. All right, so maybe you don't know what I'm talking about with the new law. So I'm going to read it to you verbatim so we don't miss anything. Because sometimes I give you my impression, but this one I want to read to you word for word. So, the new law is, under the law, all buildings occupied before 1992, which is important, must complete a milestone inspection by December 31st, 2024. This is an examination of the building's structural integrity by an architect or engineer. The requirement also applies to buildings at least 25 years old that are within 3 miles of the coast. So it is not everyone, which is why, and there's so much misconception out there. This is why I like to explain these things to you on these videos, because I get phone calls and people are panicking. I just got a phone call last week in Ave Maria, and if you're unfamiliar, Ave Maria is way inland. It is not going to apply to this person's condominium, and they're in an absolute panic. So you've got the threshold of 3 stories, the age, and the distance from the coast. Now, you may say, what, and why is this happening? Well, basically what happened was when those towers came down tragically a couple years ago, Surfside, those buildings collapsed. That kind of changed everything, and it was discovered that these condo associations were not doing any sort of milestone inspections because they didn't need to. So now, fast forward a couple years later, now it's absolutely required. It's absolutely law. You're not getting around it. And that is why I've gotten many questions where people are asking, why is this happening all of a sudden with condos and it was never happening before? Why are people seeing double, triple, quadruple increases in their fees? Well, this is why. So a lot of the communities preemptively, as soon as this came out, and as soon as the rumor was that they were going to mandate this, people started putting it in motion, getting their reports, lining up their inspectors, structural engineers, and what was discovered is that a lot of buildings were having issues, sinking an inch, 2, maybe even 3. You know what? There's something out in the news today. Let me read that to you as well. All right, here it is. I found it. So this is from the AP News, Sunny Isles Beach, Florida. This is today. Almost 36 high-rise condos and luxury hotels along the beach in South Florida are sinking or settling in unexpected ways. In some cases because of nearby construction, according to a new study. So they surveyed 35 buildings along a 12-mile stretch along Miami Beach to Sunny Isles Beach, and they discovered that these buildings had sunk or settled anywhere from 0.8 to 3.1 inches. About half of the buildings are less than a decade old. About half of the buildings are less than a decade old. So one of them is the Ritz-Carlton Tower. That is a multi-million-dollar building. Everybody is in absolute shock that these buildings are sinking. So it goes on to say that this was unexpected. The study underscores the need for ongoing monitoring and a deeper understanding of the long-term implications for these structures. It is not uncommon for buildings to sink a little during and soon after construction, but the scientists called their discovery surprising because some of the changes took place several years later. I will link this article if you want to do a deep dive into it, but basically it says limestone under the South Florida beach is interspersed with layers of sand, and that is what's shifting. I mean, if you think about it, I would think that most sixth graders would know that if you build something on sand, it's probably going to sink. But listen, these developers, I don't know. Maybe they didn't know. But my gosh, can you imagine if you spent $5 million, $10 million? And that is what I'm talking about when we're talking about these buildings along Miami Beach. This is the top of the top of the top. I mean, that is pretty darn scary. So all of that said, the deadline on these reports is the end of this month. So you're going to see, in my opinion, if not already, a bit of a mass exodus on condos. And listen, I know, I say this to you, you know what I'm going to say. Somebody is out there, fake account, typing it out, telling me I don't know what I'm talking about, and there is not going to be any kind of crash with the condos. It's happening right now. And as I say, I don't like to use the word crash because that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the proverbial balloon in the air. And pop, 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 pop. Eventually that comes down. And that is what's happening. People were telling me, oh, Barrett,
you don't know what you're talking about. The prices in our area, it's not going to drop.
It's dropping. It is not dropping like a massive, fast rolling crash down a hill, but my gosh, it's in motion. And you know what I've been saying? 2025. Be ready, be saving your money, be counting the pennies, because that is the time where I really think everything is going to start to really come to fruition, and that market is going to start to fall in. It's already happening. There are condominiums right now that have done nothing. And if you call this week and you try to get a structural engineer out, you know how long it's going to take. There are only so many of those people that are licensed to do this work in Florida. Do you know how long that's going to take to get someone out there, and your deadline is 2 weeks from now? So there are nearly 1 million condo owners in Florida. Almost 1 million. Now, is this going to hit everybody? No. Remember, we just talked about the people it's going to affect. So if your building is newer, it's not going to affect you, theoretically. If you are more than 3 miles from the coast, it's not going to affect you, theoretically. Now, why am I saying theoretically? It's not going to directly affect you. But if you think about it, did you know, as a viewer, did you know those kind of guidelines and boundaries around the new law? Did you know that, or did you think it was all condos? Because the predominance of people out there that are interested in Florida real estate, they think it's all condos. And that is what's causing, that belief. If you put a belief out there, it kind of starts to build on itself and gain steam. That's what's happening with condos. Any buyer in the last 6 months that I've talked to that's interested in a condo asks about this new law. Can you keep me out of this problem? And usually what they'll say is, I want a water view. I'd love a view of the Gulf of Mexico. I'd love a view of the Atlantic Ocean, but I don't want to deal with those. I don't want that. I don't want to deal with any of those assessments. Well, listen, you're right smack in it, because most of those buildings are older because they've been there. That's where people built. They built in the best spot, which is where that water view is, with the exception of like what we just talked about in Miami. Those are newer buildings. So you think about that, and there's only a few things you can do to avoid kind of falling prey to the potential for, I don't know, a punt down the road. If you buy a condo and let's say you're at the 4-mile mark, is it possible that there's a heavy storm season, something happens, and a new rule comes out, a new law comes out, and they say, yeah, we know it was three miles, but now it's going to be 4. So you bought a condo that was 23 years old so that the age didn't affect you. Well, remember, age rolls. You're going to get there eventually. So if you're in that 3 miles from the coast, that's going to be what I would say is a level 1. If you want to mitigate your risk a little bit, just push out a bit. And as you push out, you're going to find that the condos are going to be newer. They're going to be built better, theoretically. You should have impact resistant doors and windows. Your hurricane risk, your surge risk, your wind risk, theoretically is better because you don't have that wind coming right off the water. So if you're willing to go inland just a little bit, you're going to do a little bit better in terms of risk mitigation. There's going to be less likelihood that you're in a flood zone. Not impossible, though. You can be in a flood zone away from the coast. You absolutely can. So you want to pay attention to that. The other question I get all the time is, well, what if I buy on the 5th floor? Well, we used to say, yeah, if it's flooding on the 5th floor, then, we're probably, none of us are here anymore. But now what they do is, if it will flood the 1st floor, that can damage the integrity of the building. So if the 1st floor is in a flood zone, so is everybody on up. So really important to know these things if you're going to buy a condo. And that is why it is so important to work with a good agent. So as I always say, if I can be of help, let me know. I do have a referral company, and if not me, I can refer you to somebody that I personally vet, and will get you the right person for the area that you're going to buy in, because you want somebody who knows the specific area down to a micro level that you're going to buy in. I offer consultations. I can speak to you about all of Florida, but if you want good, strong representation, then we need to hook you up with a good agent who's going to be able to get that done for you. And we have really good agents all over the state of Florida. Lots going on. If you're not intimidated by a condo, 2025, I'm telling you, that's the time.